Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. Birthday, Fear, and Marriage. "A toast," she exclaimed, holding up her shot, waiting for the others to follow suit. The two men held up their drinks, clinking and laughing. "Happy birthday," she yelled unusually loud. I'm sure the whole bar heard her. The birthday man had the biggest smile, looking happy, appreciative, nostalgic, if nostalgic had a look. He had his head cocked to one side, his whole face lit up, but his eyes were deep and distant. The small bistro table reached up to their chests. Even though the bar was dimly lit, displaying the usual neon beer signs and overhead Pabst Blue Ribbon bar lights, I could still see her cheery outfit. A green sequins top, black jeans, and sandals. She had on those antenna headbands sporting springy shamrocks. They bounced around on her head as she talked and laughed. She looked cute for the beginning of spring and St. Patrick's Day, and that thought sent an electrifying pang through me. The guys beside her had green t-shirts, a typical guy effort. The rest of the bar was a steady buzz of clinking, laughter, and the occasional loud outburst of people becoming intoxicated. "I'll be right back," said the girl's voice enthusiastically as she hopped down from her seat and headed towards the ladies' room. Her blouse reflected the lighting, and she appeared to glide away, her long, dark hair trailing behind. The guys chopped it up, patting each other on the back and carrying on like teens. Brothers? Or father and son? I couldn't recall, but they looked slightly alike. Then I remembered that the big guy had an older brother, so this one must have been his son. "I got another round," the girl in green declares excitedly. She puts down 3 green beer mugs and returns to retrieve 3 shot glasses. I didn't see her leave the women's restroom and felt annoyed. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss a move. I feel a splash on my wrist, and a tall guy with dark hair and light eyes, who must be 10 years younger than me, is smiling at me. "I'm so sorry," he says. "I didn't mean to bump your table." I lick off the alcohol from my wrist, and he smiles wider. "Can I get you another?" "Sure," I say. "A kamikaze, please." He leaves and returns with drinks for both of us. We engage in small talk, but the conversation takes a twist. It starts to get deep, past relationships and family. And finally, he asks, "Are you single?" "I am," I say. "It's only been 3 months, but I feel so free now." "I know what you mean," he concurs. "I've been single for about a year now." Just then, the DJ blasts the perfect dance song, and we look at each other and get up to dance. It is so much fun, I think. I enjoy the sweaty feeling from dancing as my hair sticks to my face and neck. The pheromones in the air with the slight alcohol buzz, the way the room swirls in the dimness, and the vibe of happiness and opportunity in the bar. My body feels like it is moving exactly how I want it to. I feel sexy and elated. After a 25-minute set, we make our way back to the table. The girls I came with are in their corners, talking to their catches of the day. I didn't come for any of this, but I was glad it found me. He walks over to the bar to get us another round, and I bite my lip as I see his arms flex and reach into his pocket for his wallet. He's cute, my type, and he can carry a conversation. He's not an idiot, I muse. As he walks back towards me, I avert my eyes, acting like I wasn't watching him. But then I see Shamrock Girl. She is hugging the big guy, and the one I assume is the son comes in for a group hug. They hold on to each other, appearing like a tight-knit unit. She must be the sister, I decide. I've heard that the big guy has a sister. A kiss near my lip. He's back. My flirty side goes in for a small nibble. He smiles directly into my eyes, and I can tell I got him. "That's so sexy," he glows, after unleashing the shy girl act, engaging in intelligent conversation, being interested in all he says, and validating his masculine gestures. Classic flirting. I arrive at the next step. Teasing. It's not as calculated as it sounds. It comes naturally to me, and I could teach a class as good at it as I am at it. I stare at him as I sip my drink. There is a commotion at the Shamrock Girls' table. A group of guys and a couple of girls come in, high-fiving and hugging the 3 family members. I hear loud, "Happy birthdays," and there is camaraderie. It's a celebratory moment. I've had enough. I didn't come for this. I stand up, grab my jacket, which feels heavier than usual, and tell my cutie I need to find my friends. He looks disappointed, and I am struggling to keep my composure. My chest starts to feel tight, and my stomach starts to turn. I feel my heart beating faster, and my hands begin to shake. I feel sadness, then resolve, then the anger. I became blind. I walk to the Shamrock Girls' table and stand directly before her. My eyes are hard, and I stare at her. She stops talking, and her face straightens. The big guy, the killer, sucks in his breath. "Must be nice," I utter. Must be nice to have a brother to celebrate his birthday with. My voice becomes louder and colder. She doesn't say anything. The surrounding people begin to look towards us. I snatch her hair with exceptional force and yank her face to the table. It is then the rage takes over. I fucking hate you! I scream at her. I hate you. I say to the big guy, attempting to reach for his sister. I pull the small, sharpened, handheld spear I carry and jab it into his hand. He yells and pulls his hand back. It is dawning on her who I am. She thought 25 years ago was long forgotten. The big guy thought it was behind him. He felt he paid his price for killing my brother, his classmate, and his childhood friend. But he didn't. I didn't get to serve my justice. I'm screaming viciously at everyone who is attempting to reach for me. I look like a rat cornered, trying to find a way out. In the corner of my eye, I see my cutie. He doesn't look shocked. He is slightly smiling at me. Let me do this! I scream. I raise my other hand with my spear and see myself driving it into her temple as I hold her down with my other hand by her hair. No, don't, was the only muffled words I heard from her. Screams ensue as I graze her head and stab the table. I plunge over and over on the wooden table beside her head until the adrenaline starts to subside. I realize the music has stopped and the whole bar is watching. The big guy was stunned, but he didn't restrain me. He let me do it as I asked. He's holding his hand. He mouths, "I'm sorry." As the bar begins to fade into black, I feel someone's arms gently touching my shoulders, and my shoulders start to cave in. I slowly release my grip on her hair and let my hand fall onto my jacket. Her face, smeared with tears and sweat, looks at me as she backs away. It's my cutie's arms. He guides me away, enveloping me with his body for protection. He moves me through the crowd. My hand feels the metal of the gun, the one I bought a couple of years after the big guy killed my brother in an attempt to curb my fear of guns. It remained in its case for over 20 years. I was still afraid of them. The topic came up in my deep conversation with the cutie I met. I told him my plan. He must have thought I was joking, but he was keen when it rolled out like the scenario I painted. As he walked me out of the building, I could hear my friends calling after me. I ignored them and got into my cutie's car. He shut my door and held me. Still feeling numb, we drove to the city. Halfway there, we started opening up again, talking like we had known each other for years. Nothing ever came of that night. Not one thing. There was no police report, and no one ever brought it up. It's almost as if it never happened. I ended up marrying my cutie. He is my soulmate, and I felt complete. A few years later, the feeling came again. I felt the stirring. I began formulating another way to get her. I'd send in my cousin to seduce her, make her fall in love, then break her heart. She needs a broken heart like mine. The Enchanted Minds canvas. Ella carefully added the finishing touches to her painting, layering vibrant strokes of green amid the earthy browns and faded tans of fall. The scene was one she had sketched in the park days ago. A quiet landscape draped in the remnants of late autumn, the air crisp with the bite of encroaching winter. As her brush danced across the canvas, her mind drifted to the frozen pond she had sat across from, its surface resembling a sheet of shattered glass reflecting the pale autumn sky. Then something shifted. A sudden eerie chill prickled her skin, creeping over her arms despite the warmth of her studio. The faint scent of damp earth and decaying leaves filled her nose, so vivid it nearly overwhelmed her senses. A sharp gust of wind brushed past her cheek, biting at the tip of her nose. She gasped. Her fingers trembled around the brush as the sensation deepened, no longer just a figment of her imagination. It felt real. The world around her wavered, its edges blurring as if reality itself had begun to ripple beneath her fingertips. Ella's heart raced. Her hand wasn't just gliding over the painting, it was sinking into it. Her studio began to shift, the walls dissolving into streaks of color, and then, in an instant, she was there. The park looked exactly as she had painted it. Frost-laced grass, undressed trees swaying, and a frozen pond glistening under the pale sunlight. The icy air sent a chill up her spine as the wind whispered through brittle branches. Her heart pounded. How am I here? Before she could take a step forward, the sensation snapped, sharp and sudden, like a rubber band stretched to its limit. The world around her rushed past in a dizzying blur, and in the blink of an eye, she was yanked back to her studio. Ella glanced around, her breath unsteady as she tried to ground herself. Her gaze settled back on her painting, looming more vibrant, more lifelike, almost as if it had absorbed some essence of reality itself. Her eyes then fell to the floor. Scattered across the hardwood were remnants of dead grass and brittle leaves, the very same ones that had lined the park's frozen ground. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Then, like a whisper from the past, a memory surfaced. One she had long convinced herself was nothing more than a dream. This had happened before. A few months after waking from her coma, she had felt the same eerie pull, like an inexplicable shift between worlds. But she had dismissed it, blaming it on the lingering haze of recovery, a mere figment of her imagination. But it wasn't just her imagination, was it? She had seen it happen, and more. It started subtly. Cats stretching, birds ruffling their feathers, shifting within the canvas. With each incident, her paintings became eerily lifelike, earning her recognition and eventually her own gallery exhibition. But this was different. This time, she hadn't just brought something to life. She had been pulled into it. A shiver ran down her spine. The cold from that autumn landscape still clinging to her bones. She turned back to the painting, a strange weight settling in her chest. Whatever was happening to her, it wasn't just art anymore. It was something deeper, something more powerful, and she had no idea how to control it. 5 years ago. Anxious and impatient, Ella paced the hospital, her walker tracing an endless figure 8 of corridors. She wanted out. She was bored, exhausted, and angry, tired of the constant checkups, the intrusive monitoring, the way doctors spoke about her as if she weren't in the room. Most of all, she was tired of feeling like the world had moved on without her. Her classmates had graduated, their social media filled with college acceptance letters, beach trips, and late-night adventures. Meanwhile, she was stuck here, relearning how to walk, how to hold a fork without her hands trembling, how to exist in a life that had been paused for a little over 6 months. For half a year, Elizabeth Ella Larson had been lost in a silent void. Trapped in a coma she had no memory of falling into. One moment, she was on the bus ride home from a school field trip, laughing with her friends. The next, darkness. Her class's bus narrowly avoided a catastrophic collision with a tractor trailer. The truck driver, having fallen asleep at the wheel, veered into the bus's lane, forcing the driver to make a desperate maneuver to prevent disaster. While most students escaped with minor injuries, the incident took a more serious toll on a few. Tragically, the bus driver suffered a heart attack at the scene, and 2 students sustained severe head injuries, slipping into comas, Ella being one of them. When Ella woke, the piercing brightness of hospital lights and the rhythmic beeping of monitors shattered the stillness, as if time had paused. But the world hadn't waited for her. Her face was already all over social media, her story shared and reshared by curious classmates. Though her parents and hospital staff tried to shield her from the media, it was inevitable. Visiting friends posted selfies and status updates, ensuring her return wasn't just her own. Initially, the attention was overwhelming. Luckily, to Ella's relief, the novelty eventually faded. Only a few persistent reporters and social media diehards still sought a glimpse of the girl who emerged from a coma. Meanwhile, life resumed for everyone else, leaving Ella to realize she hadn't just lost 6 months. She had lost so much more. pep rallies, graduation, and spring break. Before the accident, Ella had been an exceptional artist for her age. She had spent years perfecting her craft, creating paintings so lifelike they seemed to breathe on the canvas. Art was her passion, her escape, and hopefully her future. She had applied to countless schools, dreaming of the day she would walk through the doors of an art academy. But the more she recovered, the more she sensed that something had changed. A strange energy pulsed through her hands, as if the accident had left behind more than just scars. At first, she had brushed the feeling off as nothing more than a lingering effect of her recovery. However, when she finally picked up a pencil again, her art would begin to capture more than just reality. Hoping to lift her spirits, her parents brought her sketchbook. The physical therapist agreed and encouraged her to draw, believing it might restore her fine motor skills quickly. But the first time she tried sketching, her fingers, once so steady, betrayed her. The once effortless strokes turned to jagged, clumsy lines, chicken scratch from a toddler's hand. Frustrated and disheartened, she shoved the sketchbook aside and refused to touch it for days. Then, one afternoon, on impulse, she picked it up again. She began sketching the vase of flowers that sat on her hospital windowsill, a gift from her art teacher. The sunlight caught the delicate curve of a lily petal just right, making it the perfect subject to draw. As she sketched the details, a strange warmth spread through her fingertips. As Ella became completely immersed in her sketch, her mind wholly focused, the air around her began to shift. The scent of fresh lilies began to overwhelm her senses, far more intense than before. Startled, she looked up. Her breath caught. The real flowers had changed. The lilies that were half closed were now in full bloom, mirroring the one she had just finished drawing. Her sketchbook slipped from her hands, landing with a soft thud on the hospital bed. Ella stared at her fingers, watching as dust particles swirled in the afternoon light. Except they weren't just dust. The air around her shimmered, an iridescent glow clinging to her skin. She blinked, her heart pounding. It had to be a hallucination, a trick of her recovering mind, just a dream, she told herself, while her eyes were still fixated on her hands. Yet deep down, she knew the truth. Something within her had been unlocked. Awakened by the sun's warmth, Ella sat up, squinting against the bright light streaming through her bedroom window. Despite the winter chill, the morning sun cast an ironic touch of warmth to the frigid 30-degree day. As she shook off the haze of sleep, the sharp beeping of her alarm clock jolted her fully awake, a nagging reminder of the day ahead. She was scheduled to inspect the gallery rooms in the newly opened art building downtown, ensuring her pieces were displayed exactly as she envisioned. Tomorrow marked her debut exhibition, the moment she had worked toward for years. Excitement and nerves twisted in her chest. It was finally here, and she wasn't about to leave anything to chance. Silencing the alarm, Ella swung her legs over the bed and took a steadying breath. She grabbed the outfit she had picked out the day before, sophisticated yet artistic, the perfect balance. Heading towards the bathroom, she caught a glimpse of her latest work, leaning against the wall, a hypnotic twilight scene of Pittsburgh's skyline reflected in the Monongahela River. The river seemed to shimmer, as if a ripple might break across the surface if she stared too long. Nope. Nope. Not today, she muttered, quickly looking away. No incident, especially not tomorrow. But what if it happened again? What if a painted river overflowed, flooding the gallery? Or a sudden gust of wind swept through, touching the viewers? And what if they realized what she could do? She pushed the thought aside, taking a deep breath as she splashed water on her face. She needed to focus on the gallery, on today. No distractions. She'd been careful all week. Still, the memory of being transported to the park unnerved her. Nothing that extreme had happened since, but the occasional ripple of water or a bird nearly lifting off the canvas was enough to make her uneasy. After getting dressed, she made a quick breakfast. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a text from her best friend, Rosalie. Good luck, Ella, and relax. You've got this. See you tomorrow at the show. Ella smiled at the words, even though her stomach was in knots. She typed back, "Thanks. I'll see you tomorrow." Her phone buzzed again almost immediately. This time, the gallery curator. Just a reminder, the final walkthrough is scheduled for 11 a.m. Bring any additional pieces you'd like to include in the collection. The gallery is confident your work will be a hit. Ella inhaled and exhaled slowly. Everything would be fine. She grabbed the two paintings, the one of Pittsburgh reflected in the Monongahela, and another tucked behind it, along with her purse and keys. By the time she arrived at the gallery, her nerves had settled into quiet determination. The venue was stylish and contemporary, with high ceilings and whitewashed walls, perfect for showcasing her work. A gallery handler took the paintings she'd brought, placing them in their designated room, while a marketing assistant guided her through the maze of exhibits. Each piece displayed exactly as she had envisioned. She moved through the gallery, carefully inspecting each painting, occasionally adjusting placements to perfect the flow. Her twilight scene of Pittsburgh's skyline sat front and center, positioned so the lighting captured every reflective detail in the water. But as she stared at the shimmering river, a familiar pull stirred in her chest. No, not now. Not here. She forced herself to look away, focusing on the next piece, a series of landscapes inspired by the city's parks. Under the gallery lights, the colors felt more vibrant, almost alive, as if one could stride in. But as she neared a painting of a dense, forested path, the pull returned, subtle yet unsettling. Her hand trembled as she reached for the wall to steady herself. She couldn't risk it. Not here. Not today. Why was this starting again? Was it because she was tense and anxious, trying to suppress the sensation? She shifted her focus to the gallery curator and marketing assistant, who had been quietly observing her. Forcing a smile, she said, "Everything looks great. I think we're all set for tomorrow." "Fantastic. Everything will be perfect. We just need you to review the virtual gallery site and give your approval," the curator said cheerfully. Ella nodded, her thoughts swirling. Tomorrow would be okay. She just had to keep her focus. If she could get through today without any mishaps, then tomorrow, the grand opening, she would be able to maintain control. She just had to make sure nothing came to life from her paintings or whisked anyone away. The next day arrived in a flash. Her art exhibition was set to begin at 1 p.m., and she needed to be at the gallery by 11 a.m. to handle any last-minute details, do a final walkthrough, and prepare for the guests. Last night, after returning home to unwind, she had felt the urge to draw, but she forced herself not to. She needed to rest, to stay focused. She didn't want to tempt the growing power within her. By the time Ella stepped into the gallery, the air was rich with the scent of fresh flowers, the sweetness of wine, and the faint trace of new paint. The space had transformed overnight. Elegant spotlights bathed each painting in a soft glow, making the artwork seem even more alive. Small, stylish benches were arranged throughout the room, inviting visitors to linger. Soon, guests began to arrive, mingling with glasses of wine in hand, their murmurs forming a low hum of anticipation. Ella smoothed her dress, a beautiful wrap dress with bell sleeves, the fabric printed with an abstract design from one of her early paintings. Her friend Rosalie had helped bring it to life, sewing it into a wearable piece of art. Ella's hands trembled slightly as she scanned the room, watching how people responded to her work. Rosalie was the first to spot her, letting out an excited squeal as she rushed over. "You did it, Ella. Look at all these people. And your work. It's absolutely breathtaking under these lights. You've been busy over the years. Just look at all these paintings." She squeezed Ella's arms, beaming. "How are you feeling?" Ella forced a smile, letting out a nervous chuckle. "Excited, nervous, and definitely a little terrified." Rosalie laughed reassuringly. "Totally normal. Just breathe, okay? This is the moment you've been waiting for. And it's happening." Before Ella could respond, a voice cut through their conversation. Ella Larson. She turned to see a distinguished older man with long salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes behind wire-framed glasses. He extended a hand. "Hello, I'm George Morgan, art critic for the Tribune. I must say, your work is astonishing. There's a vibrancy and realism here that I rarely see in paintings these days." Ella's heart pounded against her ribs. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan. That means a lot." She smiled, trying to keep her nerves in check. His gaze lingered on the twilight of Pittsburgh painting. This one in particular. It's mesmerizing. It almost feels as though the water is truly moving. How did you achieve such a remarkable effect? Ella swallowed hard. "Oh, I tend to get in a zone," she said with a small, nervous smile. "A lot of detail, layering, and finding the right mix of paint." Morgan nodded approvingly. "Enchanting, almost lifelike." As the critic moved on, Rosalie elbowed Ella subtly. "See? You're already impressing the media." Ella barely had time to absorb the moment before Dina, the gallery owner, approached with an eager expression. "Ella, would you mind coming with me? The guests would love to hear a few words from you. Some are already interested in purchasing your work. Just a short welcome and a bit about your inspiration, okay?" Ella's stomach clenched, but she nodded. This was part of the dream, right? Taking a deep breath, she followed Dina to a small platform at the center of the room. As the soft clinking of glasses faded and guests turned to face her, Dina introduced her. Ella steadied herself and took a deep breath. "Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Larson, but most people call me Ella. First, I want to thank Dina, the gallery owner, and Jessie, the curator, for giving my art the honor of being the first exhibit in this beautiful new space. And of course, thank you all for being here tonight." She continued her speech, her voice growing steadier with each word. When she finished, a soft round of applause filled the room. Ella exhaled, a wave of relief washing over her. But just as she stepped down, a ripple of movement caught her eye. The twilight river. The light against the canvas shimmered. The water within the painting trembled, as if stirred by a real breeze. Ella's breath hitched. No, not now. Please, not now. Panic surged through her, but she forced herself to focus, willing the movement to stop. Every ounce of concentration was poured into holding it still. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms, grounding herself. Slowly, the movement faded. The river stilled. She exhaled, relief washing over her as she forced a smile, just as a guest approached with a compliment. Hold it together. Just a few more hours. But deep down, she knew the truth. Her abilities weren't just growing stronger. They were tied to her emotions. And she was losing control. Across the room, A guest murmured in disbelief. "I could have sworn the cat's tail just wagged." Another gasp followed. Did that bird just fly to the other side of the canvas? Ella's stomach twisted. She needed to master her abilities fast, the edge of a moment. With squealing tires, the bus slowly came to a stop, its doors groaning open. Abby's first step after the long journey felt weak. Her shoes crunched in the snow as she looked around and slung her bag over her shoulder, her breath curling in the crisp December air. The familiar sight of her childhood town, a quiet corner of North Carolina, had hardly changed in the years she'd been away. Christmas lights flickered in the windows of the small brick houses, and a gentle dusting of snow clung to the evergreens lining the main street. Home, she thought, although it hadn't been a home to her for years, and it certainly lost that feeling long ago. She was simply here to spend the holidays with her mother, celebrate her birthday, and finally take a deep breath after years of grueling studies. But as she adjusted the strap of her duffel bag, she collided with someone hard. The road was slick with fresh snow, and Abby's boots failed to find purchase. She slipped, her arms flailing as gravity yanked her down. She hit the ground with a thud, snow seeping into her coat. "Ow!" she muttered, wincing. Before she could move, a pair of strong hands reached out to help her up. "You okay?" The voice was warm, concerned. Abby looked up. Irritation flickered through her until her brain caught up to what just happened. She froze. The man before her was impossibly familiar. His sharp blue eyes, the dimple in his cheek as he frowned. It was as if she were staring at one of the few old photographs she kept of her father. Luke, a man she never knew. Her father who left her and her mom so soon after Abby was born. It couldn't be. This man looked no older than 30. Her father, if he were alive, would be nearing 60. "Are you okay?" the man asked again, still with a firm grip on her shoulders, as if she might collapse again if he let go. Abby struggled to find words. I think so. Let me get you a coffee. That'll help." Unable to object, and with her thoughts spinning, she found herself following him into a small coffee shop she didn't recognize. Was this new? Had she just never noticed it before? The place had an old-fashioned charm, with a jukebox humming softly in the corner, and a menu written in looping cursive script. "Hi, Luke. What can I get you today?" The girl behind the counter smiled warmly. He ordered 2 cups of steaming black coffee, while Abby sat down at a small table by the big window. She looked outside at the snow-dusted street, the glowing Christmas decorations, the town she knew so well. Yet something felt different, familiar, but not quite. quite right. I'm Luke, by the way. The man introduced himself as he set the cups down. Yes, she heard that. But she wasn't processing it. Abby's stomach twisted. I'm Abby. That's a pretty name. Are you from here, Abby? Or just visiting? The small talk momentarily distracted her from the gnawing sense of unease. A little bit of both, I guess. I was born here, but moved away when I went to college. He nodded, sipping his coffee. Abby studied his face. The only pictures she had of her dad were old and grainy. Not much to go on. But this man felt so eerily familiar. Maybe a long-lost brother? A cousin? Someone with an uncanny resemblance to her father? Maybe this was the reason her dad disappeared so suddenly after she was born. Maybe he was the reason. She cleared her throat, trying to form a coherent sentence. So, what about you? Are you from around here? Yeah, born and raised. And what do you do? Abby needed to know more. Nothing much to tell? I work odd jobs here and there, but I'm trying to find something more permanent. Maybe move to a bigger place next year. They each took another sip of coffee. Abby glanced around again. She didn't recognize the people in the cafe. The decor seemed off, more old-fashioned. Then something else struck her. I don't recognize this place, she muttered, almost to herself. Luke heard her. Really? It's been here forever. Maybe I just never paid much attention, she said, forcing a small smile. You should. It's a great place. He laughed suddenly and pointed toward the jukebox in the back. That's where my wife and I shared our first kiss. We're expecting a baby girl any day now. Abby blinked. Oh, she couldn't help but smile at the small anecdote. He even blushed slightly. Sorry, I don't know why I just said that. His voice lowered. Now it was his turn to study her. There was something about her, the same blue eyes as his, but her hair, light and wavy, falling in big waves around her shoulders. You remind me of her, he said, realizing it. Abby's fingers tightened around her cup. Oh, my wife, he said, his voice softer now. Her hair, the way you move your face. You look like her. Abby swallowed hard, but remained silent. Luke chuckled awkwardly, shaking his head as if trying to get rid of the thought. It's strange, though. You feel familiar? Have we met before? Abby forced a small smile. What do you say to that? With this feeling in her gut, she couldn't explain. No, I don't think so. He nodded slowly, like trying to fit together pieces of a puzzle that wouldn't align. Weird. Weird didn't even begin to cover it. Maybe his wife was the missing piece in all of this. What's her name? Your wife? Abby asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Part of her already knew, but needed him to confirm it. Julie. Luke leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on the table, as though he could read the answer in her face. You know her, Are you related? Abby's heartbeat thundered in her ears. This couldn't be a coincidence. His name was Luke. His wife's name was Julie. They were expecting a baby girl. Cold realization crept over her like a shadow. Could this be the man who vanished when she was a baby? Could this actually be her father? She opened her mouth, her breath quick and shallow. No, I don't think so. The cafe's warmth faded. The clinking of cups, the murmur of voices, all drowned out by the rush of blood in her ears. Luke wasn't moving. He stared at her, eyes searching, waiting, and then, like a dam breaking, she couldn't hold it in anymore. I think she's my mom. Abby's voice trembled. I think you're my dad. You disappeared almost 25 years ago. Right after I was born. Luke didn't react at first. The weight of her words sank into the space between them, heavy and unmovable. Seconds passed like hours. She wanted to run, but stayed glued to her seat opposite of him. Then he finally spoke. That's not possible. I'm right here. I'm not missing. I come to this place all the time. He shook his head, as if refusing to let the realization settle. Besides, I would have been a kid, 6 years old back then. Back then? The words caught in Abby's throat. Back when? Her fingers trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. She inhaled sharply, steadying herself before asking the question she suddenly dreaded. What year is it? Luke's face was a storm of emotions. Confusion, disbelief, something close to fear. 1999. Abby's breath left her in a silent gasp. The world around her warped, twisted. The answer she had been looking for had been right in front of her all along. She had stepped back in time. Killer date. No one suspects a good-looking man. He's too handsome to be a killer. And that's exactly what Michael Holloway used to his advantage. He spent hours at the gym, shaping his already good genes into a chiseled mask. It also helped that he was charismatic, with a smile that made most women double take. He had brilliant green eyes from his mother, paired with light brown hair from his father. At 6 feet in height, he was just a six-pack short of a photoshopped model. Michael knew he was different from a young age. He was 7 years old and on a family trip to Vermont to visit his grandparents. He was an only child of 2 loving only children, and that meant he naturally got a lot of attention. One night, as the adults were out back drinking and talking next to the fire pit, Michael was following his grandparents' old dog around the house. A chirp from the wall clock signaled 8 o'clock, food time. Right on cue, the dog's medicated kibble dropped into its bowl in the laundry room. He watched as the dog slowly scarfed up the food. Towards the bottom of the bowl, there was a clump of kibble that had not broken into smaller pieces. The old dog ate it up without noticing. It gave an abrupt, hiccup-like sound, and then started wheezing. Michael jumped back at first, but watched intently as the dog struggled to breathe. The hard clump of kibble blocked its windpipe. He did nothing as the dog walked around, not knowing what to do and unable to get air. It moved toward the doorway, but Michael stood up and closed the door. The dog looked up at him, its foggy eyes not comprehending what was going on. Michael waited until the dog collapsed. He brushed its soft fur gently until its pulse was gone. That was the first death Michael had witnessed, and so began his secret obsession with the morbid. He knew it was wrong, yet it got him excited like nothing else. Not alcohol, not drugs, not sex. Now he was in his 20s, a year out of college, living on his own in the big city. After years of reading and fantasizing about it, he was finally going to make his move. There was an old diner near his apartment where he often went for late-night meals on his cheat days. Eventually, the staff had gotten used to him and his usual order: a lettuce-wrapped burger with a side of saltless fries. One of the servers, a pudgy man with an acne-scarred face, told him on a particularly slow night that the diner was going broke. "We don't even have real cameras," he said with a laugh. When he noticed Michael look up at the camera on the ceiling, he added, "Those are empty. Pretty much a toy, just to scare people from getting any funny ideas." Michael laughed, flashing his pearly white teeth. The server laughed too, unaware of the mistake he had just made. It was a Friday, like any other for Michael. He got done with work early and went to the gym for 2 hours. To Michael, the only thing that got close to the feeling of a kill was a good pump. He loved feeling the tension of each muscle swell with each rep, almost as if he could feel them growing. Back at his apartment, he took a long shower before getting ready for the night ahead. The first order of plan was to masturbate. He had a big night ahead, and he was not going to let testicular impulses ruin it. Whatever Michael had done to fulfill his darker fantasies in the past, he did cautiously. There was no room for error, especially now. If he were to get caught, he'd rather die than go to rot in a prison cell for the rest of his life. He had gone over the plan over and over in his head, working out any kinks in the logic until he was confident in a plan he could execute. He wanted a pretty woman, someone easy on the eyes, who had moved to the big city on a whim. She had to also be living alone, with no one to check up on her. That is, of course, if he even met a girl that night. He didn't want to rush things. The last thing he wanted was to get overzealous and overlook something stupid. Most importantly, he couldn't get attached. He repeated those words like a mantra as he waited for his food. The bell on the door dinged him out of his head. That's when he saw her. Susan Bennett wanted an uneventful night. It had been a long week, and she wasn't looking for any action. But she knew Michael was the one as soon as she saw him across the diner. Her mind began to race, and she did her best to quiet it down. Keeping her eyes low, she followed the server to the booth right in front of the brown-haired model. If she had a type, Michael was it. She asked for water with no ice to buy her some time and pretended to read the menu. In reality, her eyes kept darting toward him. Her left hand crept into her handbag to check if she had what she needed should the night get frisky, and breathed out a sigh of relief. She also felt around for the pepper spray to use in case of emergencies. Her gaze swept over the menu as she tried to figure out how to approach him. With a head of shiny blonde hair and a curvy body, she wasn't usually the one to make the first move. She didn't have to. "Is this seat taken?" said a smooth voice. Susan looked up to find Michael standing in front of her. His smile distracted her, but she recovered fast. "No," she said, flashing a smile of her own. "It is not." Michael slid into the seat across from her, and she caught the scent of dirty vanilla. She liked it. "Hi," Michael said with an outstretched hand. "My name's Michael." "Susan," she said. His hand was cool to the touch. Susan was wearing a low-cut tank top, not for grabbing attention, but because she thought she looked good in it. But she didn't mind, as Michael's eyes quickly glanced down during their handshake. They exchanged some pleasantries and got to know each other. Susan found out that Michael works as a fitness coach, and Michael was amused when he found out that Susan was a freelance designer. "I didn't need to be in the city," she admitted to him. "But things at home were rough, and I kind of just needed an excuse to get out of there. You know, I get it," he said. "Parents can be a lot to deal with." "Yeah." Her voice was low. "I just feel guilty about ignoring them sometimes. I mean, they raised me, put a roof over my head, and fed me. It feels the least I can do is call them once in a while, just to let them know I'm okay." Michael sat back and studied her face. It was beautiful, with the sharp features of her nose and jaw accenting the curves of her cheeks and lips. When I was in college, I took a philosophy class with a pretty eccentric professor. One of the exercises he loved to do was hand out cards with random topics on them and encourage you to debate from that point of view. One day, I got a card that said, "Parents don't deserve anything from their children." Now, I don't think anything is quite that cut and dry, but for the sake of the exercise, I went with it. Susan sipped at her water as Michael went on. The point starts with a sort of analogy. Take your phone, for example. The person, or more likely, people, who made that phone will never use it. In fact, they make it knowing that it's not for them. There was a demand, and they were meeting it. It is a societal role that they choose. My argument was that it was the same for a human. There is a demand, an ecological need to reproduce, to keep the species alive. A person who chooses to have a baby is, in effect, meeting the market demand. To expect something back, monetarily or otherwise, once your job of raising that child is done, is not part of the contract. Michael sat back with a deep breath. Of course, there are holes in that argument, as my classmates pointed out, but you get the gist. Susan watched Michael as he got a sip of his own drink, an iced tea lemonade. "Switched tables, I see," said the server, sliding a lettuce-wrapped burger in front of him. "Here's your order, Michael." "Thanks, Brittany," Michael said. He looked back at Susan to find her smiling at him. He shrugged. "I come here often." Susan's server came back to take her order. "A buffalo chicken wrap, please," she said. He scribbled it down and left to place the order. The conversation continued, nearly uninterrupted, for an hour. By then, Susan had already made up her mind on what she wanted to do. And so had Michael. Michael paid for the meal, refusing Susan's attempts to pay him back. "You saved me from a lonely dinner. This is the least I can do." The city air was cool, and it gave them an excuse to move closer to each other as they walked. Michael said, with calculated hesitation. "I apologize if it's too soon, but my apartment is a block away. I was thinking maybe we could go up for a couple of drinks. Hang out?" Susan felt like it was her lucky day. "That sounds nice," she answered. "If we cut across this alley, we'll be there in 5 minutes. He paused and then added, "If you're okay with that." She said she didn't mind, and they turned into the alley that led to the back of Michael's apartment building. It was quiet inside the halls, and they shook the chill out of their bones. "I live on the 6th floor. We can go wait for the elevator, or we can just take the stairs here." "I can't disappoint Mr. Health Coach now, can I?" "Stairs it is," Michael said, holding the door open for her. Things were going better than he could have hoped, and he did his best not to let his anticipation show. However, as they walked up the stairs, one thing began to bug him. A nagging voice in the back of his head that asked one simple question. "Do you love her?" He told himself to not get attached and pulled out the door to the 6th floor. "It's the second door on the right, 607. The hallway was empty, and there were no cameras in the stairwell. No one knew that she was there. Michael opened the door to his apartment and let her step inside first. He had lit a candle while he got ready, and though it had been nearly 2 hours since it was out, the fragrance still hung in the air. "This is a nice place," Susan said. The studio apartment was sparsely furnished, but everything felt purposeful. A rustic red couch paired with an oak coffee table. A matching oak dining table sat in the corner of the kitchen area. Numerous paintings hung on the beige walls, and a few plants bordered the sliding door to the balcony. "Thank you," he said, taking her coat from her and hanging it in the front closet. He brushed his hair out of his way and smiled to himself. she was here. Everything he wanted. He took a second to admire her a distance as she looked at his record collection. "So, what would you like to drink?" he asked. She said. "Anything strong? Like a whiskey?" Michael knelt down and picked up a bottle of aged Kentucky bourbon. "Will this do?" "Works for me." Michael took out 2 glasses and dropped in 2 thick blocks of ice. "This a sweet collection you got here," Susan said. "Do you mind if I play one?" "Go right ahead." The records were alphabetically ordered, and Susan slid her finger along the slide until she made it to Kind of Blue. She slipped it out of its cover and put on the record player. Michael froze when he heard the first few notes of his favorite record, and then shook his head. "Great choice," he said. He took up the glasses and walked over to her. They sat down together on the sofa, sipping at their drinks and taking in the music. Susan closed her eyes and laid her head back. The sight was so dizzying that Michael placed the cool glass against his temple. "I'll be right back," he said. He placed his glass on an old jazz-themed coaster and walked into the bedroom. He got what he needed, a candle and lighter, but stood in the dimly lit room a while longer. He pictured his hands around Susan's throat, and his heart rate picked up. He held his breath for a few seconds, and then slowly let it put. Then, once more. His fingertips began to get tingly, and he knew he was ready. When he went back into the living room, Susan was staring out the sliding door. She jumped when he flicked the lighter. "Do you like vanilla?" he asked. Susan nodded, and then returned her attention to the city outside. Michael grabbed his drink and downed the rest of it. "Did something catch your eye?" "No," Susan answered. "It's just this city, always so alive, so big. It just reminds you how small you really are." Michael adjusted his posture and approached her from the back. "Not to me," he whispered. "Not in here." Susan turned around to face him. "You think so? From where I'm standing. You're all I see." He leaned forward slowly and waited, eyes locked, for her to move in. She hesitated for a second and then closed the distance. The kiss was explosive. Once their lips met, they did not separate. Michael closed the blinds with one hand, while the other caressed Susan's face. His thumb gently brushed her smooth cheeks. Michael's hands snaked down, and without missing a beat, he picked her up. His firm hands supported her thighs as he walked toward the sofa. It wasn't until he laid her down on the sofa that their lips parted. Susan glanced at the one empty glass on the table and grabbed her own to finish, as Michael made a show of unbuttoning his shirt. His pecs were dusted with curly brown hair, and Susan ran her fingers across his chest. Michael bent back down to kiss her once more. His hands ran along her body, his mind resisting the urge to carry out the plan he had set out on. Every time he worked up the courage to move his hands to her neck, his heart pushed them down. Susan moaned lightly under him, and he thought of his own pleasure. His heart rate picked up once more, and the tingling sensation returned to his fingers. As they kissed, he put his left hand around her throat and began to give it some pressure. Susan didn't react, either unaware of the sensation or unbothered by it. After a few moments, he tightened his grip. Susan pulled away from him, but still didn't fight him. She simply stared up at him, her breath caught in her throat, doing his best to keep his heart rate under control. Michael closed his hand around her throat even further. Worry flickered in her eyes, but panic didn't set in until Michael put his right hand around her throat too. His hands wrapped all the way around her delicate throat, and she began to flail as she realized what he was doing. Her hands slapped at his biceps and then reached hopelessly for his face. She tried to croak something out, but he tightened his grip further still. For a moment, he thought he saw her laugh to herself, but it was soon replaced by a deadpan expression as her brain lost oxygen. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and he kept squeezing with both hands, watching her intently as the life left her body. Her body stopped moving, but he didn't relent until he was sure of what he had done. There was no going back. As he pulled his hands off of her, her body gave one final shudder. Michael's breathing was heavy, and a thick layer of sweat coated his head. He stared at his hands. If not for the fact that he could see them attached to his body, he felt as if they were not his own. He started to stand up, to move to his room, to grab his camera, when he stumbled to the ground. Disoriented, he sat up on the ground. His foot had knocked over Susan's purse, and a small white bottle rolled out. His vision grew blurry as he reached for the bottle. Inside were the remnants of a fine, white crystalline powder. Michael rolled the bottle over until he saw the writing on the side in cute little letters. Aconite. He dropped the bottle and tried to stand, but his muscles refused to hold him up. He collapsed on the ground. Michael's heart began to skip beats, and all he could do was lie on the carpeted floor and stare up at Susan's outstretched hand, lifeless. The last thing Michael saw was the tattoo of a dog on Susan's wrist, its black eyes staring down at him. Flight 24/7. It's strange how the most pivotal moments of our lives often begin in the most mundane places. For me, it's the cramped bathroom of Trans-Pacific Flight 1247, 35,000 feet above sea level, when the first tremor rips through the cabin. At this moment, I'm just another passenger with a spike of anxiety from the turbulence we just experienced, making the smart faucet in the bathroom require all of my focus, completely oblivious to the fact that fate has begun its countdown. Why does everything always come down to timing? 5 minutes earlier, and I would have been safely strapped into PODEC, connected to my assigned neural interface, already synced to the emergency protocols. The bathroom mirror catches my reflection as the cabin lights shift from institutional LED 2A to a pulsing amber hue. My heart stutters. I know that color. How people used to fly in these things before EES came around, I'll never understand. They were basically flying in an air-conditioned metal tub with wings. Everyone that flies on Trans-Pacific knows that color. Catastrophic system failure and the emergency evacuation system has begun. In the old days, this would have meant certain death. But in 2147, commercial aircrafts have evolved from their fragile predecessors. The Airbus Quantum Aeroline doesn't just fly. They adapt, transform, and when necessary, shed their parts like a snake shedding its skin. I lunge for the door. One of the only remaining places on board that doesn't have its own EES protocols. My fingers slipping on the handle, slick from the soapy water that just cleansed my skin of any dirt, germs, and other microorganisms that I collected while on board. My savior might be my demise, I say out loud to myself, spurring myself into hurried movements, wiping my hands down my shirt, hoping to gain more traction on the door handle. Fuck! I scream as the handle and door refuse to move. The status light begins blinking an infuriating red as the message, "Door locked for catastrophic system failure protocol," scrolls across the ticker above the door lock. What usually tells passengers which water closet is in use is now taunting me with my impending fate. The first automated announcement over the intercom sends ice racing through my veins. My lungs are straining against my rib cage as I try to calm my panicked breathing. Attention, passengers. CSFP number 7 has been initiated. Please remain in your seats, in your designated pod. Quantum separation will begin in 3 minutes. 3 minutes. The word echoes around in my head, like a ball bouncing through a pinball machine. Under normal circumstances, that would be plenty of time for the pods to detach cleanly, their individual gravitational fields engaging as they descended safely to the nearest emergency landing zone. But I'm not in my pod, trapped in my tin can coffin, in the one section of the plane designed to stay with the main hull, the section that goes down with the ship. My mind whirs as I try to remember the schematics video they played at the beginning of our flight, the ones no one ever pays attention to because yada yada, remain in your pods and stay secured to your neural link for the most secure flight, yada yada. Trying not to think of how my sister had mocked me for even watching the video. You're such a germaphobe, I am sure you can make it one flight without washing your hands. It's only an hour-and-a-half flight, Nova, so she had drug my name out just to grate on my nerves. This bathroom is just between PRDRZ and PRDD. only a sealed door and 20 feet separating me from my salvation. The neural link in my travel band is already buzzing frantically, trying to sync my pod. Another tremor, stronger this time. From the tiny crevice of a bathroom window, I catch a glimpse of Pa Dee silently detaching, its edges alight with blue-green fire as its gravitational field adjusts to the atmosphere around it. Beautiful, yet terrifying. 2 minutes until quantum separation. The second automated announcement sounds over the intercom. 2 minutes. Think. 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 There has to be a way out of here. My fingers trace the door's edge, feeling for there. A manual release panel, disguised as a part of the trim. The kind of backup system engineers include, but never expect anyone to actually use. I dig my nails into the seam and pull. The panel snaps off with a crack that sends me stumbling backwards. Behind the handle is a simple mechanical lever, a startling piece of analog technology for this quantum aeroline. I pull it down, instinctually throwing my body against the door. It bursts open with a pneumatic gasp, nearly sending me sprawling onto the floor. When my feet hit the smart polymer floor, I send up a silent prayer of thanks. The material has already started transforming, preparing for atmospheric re-entry, its texture shifting from a sleek, aesthetic design feature to a practical, high-traction surface designed for an emergency. In the distance, I hear the hydraulic hiss of PRD beginning its separation from the mainframe. That's when I see it. My salvation. Pansatsi. I press my neural link band against PUDC's access panel, desperately hoping it will override the security protocols. Each buzz from the band feels like a rock dropping in my stomach. It rejects me once, twice. The authentication failures flashing across the display screen in angry red letters. 1 minute until quantum separation. 1 minute until quantum separation. The automated announcement taunts me over and over again. Panicking, I run my fingers over the screen, looking for anything to try. When in doubt, restart right? The thought flits through my mind. I use my fingers to pry open the panel cover, revealing a simple, glowing red button. Such an archaic solution, hiding in plain sight. A physical reset in a world of AI and neural commands. Slamming my hand against it, I pray to whatever gods might be listening that the oldest trick in the tech world will work one more time. 30 seconds until quantum separation. The announcement washes over me like a bucket of ice water. The walls of PRC begin to vibrate as the clamps begin to initiate their release sequence. The panel flickers from red to amber. The reset seems to have done something, not a full access grant. but a system reboot that might give me enough time. Emergency reset detected. System reinitialization in progress. The words flash across the access panel. I run. The door to PRD slides halfway open, then freezes, caught between evacuation and reboot protocols, forcing my body through the gap, ignoring the sharp parts of the doorframe, cutting into my clothes and skin, willing my body to get as small as possible. The system blares warnings through the pod speakers. Unauthorized entry detected. Security breach in PODC. Inside, the other passengers stare at me with a mixture of shock and confusion. The woman they had written off as collateral damage amongst the wreckage of this impending crash, defying both protocol and probability. The flight attendant assigned to our POD makes to move towards me, then hesitates as another announcement cuts through the chaos. 10 seconds until quantum separation. I dive into my seat. The neural interface recognizes my presence as soon as my hand hits the armrest. The familiar tingle of the neural link washes over me as the pod's systems integrate my biometrics into their separation calculations. For a moment, I think I can feel the algorithms adjusting, compensating for my return. My body sags with relief as my harness straps me into the pod. Did I damn us all with my return? The Odyssey. As the sea tosses the Odyssey between its mountainous waves like a ping-pong ball, it's all I can do to keep one hand on the rudder. She's in bad shape, and I'm not much better. Ugly, purple-blue bruises stain my arms and sides from the amount of times I've been thrown against the edge of the boat, with wind stinging me with its spiteful embrace, and rain blurring my vision like tears. I can hardly see a foot in front of me. Although it wouldn't be much if I could, the whole ocean from the waves ahead, the Odyssey to the horizon, is frothed up in a frenzy of movement, and everything looks the same. Another wave crashes against the side of the boat, and she tips sideways. My legs slip out from under me. I'm hanging, arms stretched high over my head as I hold on to the rudder. The Odyssey is almost still, stuck in the uncertain midpoint between falling right way up or upside down. I clench my eyes shut and breathe in deeply. My stomach clenches as I try to hold in the air I'll need when the boat gets overturned. The vicious wind assaulting my ears stops me from hearing the wave that turns us over. My head hits the deck. I lose my grip on the rudder. My senses flood with water. I try to keep a clear head without opening my eyes. Hopefully, the hundreds of storms I've been in before have adequately prepared me for this. It's what I think every time, but I never know until the storm has passed and I'm still alive. Under the surface, the current's still the same. It tosses me from one wave to another. I grope around for a handhold I must know this deck enough to find one. But within the rage of the storm, I can't place my thoughts steadily enough to get a clear picture of the deck above water. And I plan to spend as little time as possible studying it from below. After what was probably minutes rather than hours, but was, in either case, too long, I managed to grip something. It's a kind of pole, thick, so that I have to use both hands to hold on. My lungs raise a tentative whine, a plea for my mouth to open. Not yet, I tell them. Previous storms have taught me I'll have to wait until the fury is over before I upturn my boat. In the meantime, I'll have to find my way onto the bottom of the vessel to catch a breath and try not to slip off until the storm has passed. I claw my way to the edge. My eyes are stinging from the exposure to salt water and from how tightly I'm clamping them together. There's a flame alight in my lungs, and I fight the urge to open my mouth for just 1 second to put the fire out. I grab the end of the keel and try to push myself up, but it's too wet and slippery to get a firm hold. The waves slap me against the boat. My mouth opens involuntarily to groan in pain, and I clamp it shut. Too early or too late. Water has managed to creep inside my mouth, but air hasn't. Clinging desperately to the edge of the keel, I wrap my legs around the rope that's always coiled on the end of the deck, not daring to open my eyes. I clench my knees together and try to pull the rope up to me. It slips. I only just catch it with my feet. Suppressing a yelp, I force myself to remain calm. Panicking could make me drown. Trying a different tactic, I use my boots to spread the rope out. I have to let go of the keel with one hand so I can hold it. I hesitate, then shake the reluctance out of my head. Indecision could make me drown too. My lungs burn as if they're packed with ice. My left hand slips, and I take the opportunity to grasp the rope. Pulling it upwards, I grab the keel again, this time holding the rope between 2 fingers. A lull in the waves lets me take a shaky breath, just enough to keep me going. I try again with my right hand. Letting go of the keel, I grip the rope between 2 fingers. I fiddle with it until I've got a good grip. Then pull my hand up to grasp the keel again. This is always the hardest part. So far, I've always managed it. But there's a first time for everything. If this doesn't work, I'm dead. I can't help the thought. I shove it away, recalling the face of my wife and daughter. I need to live, at least for them. Gathering my courage, I pull my hands up, bringing the rope with me. It goes taut, and I stop myself, breathing a sigh of relief. it would only waste breath. Tugging the rope upwards, I haul myself onto the bottom of the Odyssey and allow myself a breath. My lungs are still burning, but it's bearable for now. Only one more job. Taking a deep breath, I lay on my front and force my head underwater. I don't waste time tying a double anchor bend around the closest rail of my boat. Finishing it, I drag my head out of the water and quickly tie the other end of rope around my waist in a bowline knot. I pull myself back out of the water and treat myself to a well-earned breath. A few drops of salt water splash past my open lips, but at least I'm not drowning anymore, lying uncomfortably on my front. I stretch my arms and legs out to improve balance. I can feel my face turning red from being pressed against the keel, so I turn it sideways. One eye is too squashed to open. The other is squinted for maximum balance of sight and clarity, given the waves that continue to assault me. Until the storm passes, I'm stuck like this. Afterwards, I can safely overturn the Odyssey. I can only hope it won't happen before I've untied myself. But for now, all I can do is wait. Jailbreak. The cold, sterile hallway just outside of my confinement center wall made it possible to hear every footstep, growing louder as they neared me, fading as the person receded into the distance, marching to whatever task they were assigned. It was impossible to know how long I'd been here. Minutes felt like days. Hours felt like months. All I knew was that it was time. What was that quote from The Shawshank Redemption? Get busy livin' or get busy dyin'. It was now or never. I'd spent the last several months learning the patterns and rhythms of this facility, and I'd discovered that it was possible to make an escape undetected. It was, however, highly improbable. The odds of being discovered were astronomically high, and the consequences ranged from merely being returned to captivity, or, well, one simply had to come to terms with the risk being worth the reward. My mind was made up. The door to my cell was never locked, interestingly enough. The reality was I could walk out at any time, but that didn't make me any less of a captive. They knew that I couldn't just leave, and that made them reckless with this one very simple security measure. There were others here, too, held in similar circumstances as myself. If my plan was to work, if I could make my way to freedom, there would be new protocols put in place. The others would feel those consequences. That thought had kept me from trying to escape before, that my freedom would lead to their pain. But as the days and months wore on, I'd shoved those thoughts aside. Surely they had tried and failed at exactly what I'm attempting now. Did they consider how their success would affect me? I strongly doubted it. It was every man for himself in here, despite the words I'd heard time and time again as the guards and wardens walked past my cage. Sunlight flooded through the one small window behind me. It seemed as though it had been weeks of gray skies. The warmth on my skin was all the encouragement that I needed. It was now or never. I listened for the sound of 2 sets of footsteps coming down the hallway. This pair always made their way along the corridor at the same time every day, always together. After them, there would be 2 more, but this time in singles, a few minutes apart. Then it would be time. They all needed to see me, to know I was still here. Their complacency must remain intact for my plan to succeed. The faint sound of 4 feet making their way towards me finally could be heard. The steps grew louder, keeping pace with the increasing pounding of my heart as I knew the time had come. Louder, louder. My pulse began to increase. I had to bring it down. This cannot be done if I can't control my nerves. I felt my hands begin to shake a little with the increased adrenaline. Sweat began to form ever so slightly beneath my arms. I had to get control. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Then another. Then another. I cleared my mind of what was about to take place. I didn't need to go over the plan any further. I knew it well. I just needed to move with calm deliberation. Another deep breath. I felt my heart rate begin to slow. Another deep breath. My hands steadied. Then the plodding footsteps came to a stop just beyond my door. "Hello in there," came the much too delighted voice of the middling drone on patrol. He was happy to be here, happy to be in the slightest position of power over me. Had a few things gone differently, maybe it would be me out there and him in here. I like to think that I'm better than him, though. I'd help with someone's escape plan if I was alerted to it, not ratted out. Or, at the very least, I'd look the other way, but not him. No, he derives meaning from this tiny amount of authority. I won't give him the satisfaction of getting even a hint of what I'm about to do. "Hello, sir," I reply back, attempting to soften the terseness that I want to convey. The woman who patrols with him never acknowledges me. I can tell she believes he should be more dismissive of me, that he should use whatever mediocre power he has to diminish my existence even further. Nice to see the sun shining again, isn't it? It is. Hopefully, you'll get to enjoy it fully soon. I know I will. I continued to myself. Perhaps, but my shift does run pretty late into the day, so maybe another time. The woman sighed with impatience. Well, I should carry on. See you on the next pass. Yes, on the next pass. Good day, sir. their footsteps fade into the cavernous recesses of the facility to my right as I await the next set of footsteps. The waiting seemed to be the worst part of my plan so far. It gave my heart too much time to become anxious, so I tried to occupy my mind with thoughts of how the woman would berate the man if my actions were ever discovered, particularly if it became known that mere minutes after they'd passed, I'd made my move. A smile drifted across my face at the thought of it. She clearly had some type of authority over him, but I knew for certain it wasn't in rank. Perhaps it was in that same way that many women had authority over many men throughout all of time. The issues that my leaving will cause him, the erosion of his pathetic authority, brought a great joy to me that steeled my nerves for my next encounter. I heard the clicking of heels echoing in my ears, and I braced myself for another interrogation. This time, however, there was only a slight pause, and then hurried footsteps away down the hall. I heard a slight commotion and some raised voices, an uncommon occurrence that I hoped would resolve itself quickly. I strained to listen, to determine if this new development would derail my escape before it had even truly begun. It's not what you think. Please? I just needed... You needed what? It was the man who had just stopped and spoke to me. He must have backtracked and surprised the poor guy, who clearly had the same thoughts of freedom as me. Why did he choose to go now? The timing was way off for any chance of success. Pathetic fool. I cursed him under my breath, because now they'd be on high alert, if they weren't already. Back in your cell. You don't come out until we say you can come out. I thought that was clear, but please, tell me if I need to make it more so. Do you want me to do that? No, sir. That won't be necessary. I'll have to report this, you know? You brought this on yourself. Perhaps the officers will have mercy, but it's really out of my hands. The silence that followed must have been the poor soul's sad acceptance of his fate. Finally, I heard everyone continue on their way, and I listened for the steps that would signal the beginning of my mission. I said a quick prayer that my outcome would not be the same as the one I'd just witnessed while the third patrol made its way to me. "Hello in there," came the petite voice of a woman nearing 60 years old. If she was a day, she really couldn't prevent anyone from leaving on her own. But that was just as true of the others who passed by here. Their abilities relied completely on their willingness to report to those who could act. Dodging detection by these tattletales was the only path to a successful jailbreak. "Hello, ma'am," I replied back, hoping I concealed my utter disdain. Calling me ma'am is unnecessary, but even more, it is unwanted. You make me feel old. My apologies. Nice to see the sun out again, isn't it? She examined me as she asked the question. It was not small talk. She was searching me. Yes, it is. It's been a while. Hopefully, you'll get out to enjoy it." My heart rate began to rise slightly as I replied. Her eyes pierced into mine as I took slow, deliberate breaths to calm myself. I can't imagine I appeared nonchalant, but hopefully, at the very least, I wasn't giving away my intentions. "Well, I have a long day here, so it's hard to say," she said at last. My heart beat began to return to normal. "See you on the next pass." "Yes, on the next pass." "Good day, Ma." I caught myself before the word fully formed. "Good day, miss." She smiled at that, turned, and began to slowly walk toward my right, just as the others had. When I heard her steps turn the far corner and vanish, it was time for me to go. I stepped out slowly, looking both ways. The coast was clear, so I hurried to my left, careful not to break into a run, as the sound of my steps might give me away to someone I couldn't see. Around the corner to my right, there was a large desk and 2 chairs. I had discovered that this desk was only occupied 2 days a week. Today was not one of them, so I slipped behind it and waited. Now my heart was racing, but that was of no concern. If I was seen at this point, it was all over anyway. I only needed my nerves to stay intact enough to remember my plan. And if I'm being honest, the adrenaline would help my focus. This next part was crucial. I peeked under the desk and waited. Soon 8 sets of shoes appeared from the direction I needed to go. They would pass this desk and then break off in 2 separate directions, as they always did. I had never seen them, but I could hear them from my cell. If they saw me behind this desk, I was done for. It was the biggest risk to my plan that I was aware of. But they always seemed so engaged in chatting with each other that I felt like it was a risk worth taking. I tried making myself as small as I could and steadied my breathing. One glance in the wrong direction by any of these 8 sets of eyes could cost me everything. I closed my eyes and just listened. It sounded just like it always had. This group was all men. They were young and constantly spoke over each other, trying to one-up the last story, get a bigger laugh, be a bigger idiot. But their youth didn't make them any less dangerous. In fact, it was probably the opposite. They had more to gain by exposing someone like me trying to escape. Thankfully, they seemed to be their normal, obnoxious selves today. They loudly caravanned past me, but then they stopped abruptly. That wasn't normal. "Did you hear that?" One of them asked no one in particular. The group continued to jabber on. "Wait. Shh, he said more forcefully. Panic began to form in my chest. I tried to make myself even smaller and more invisible underneath the desk as I held my breath, desperately trying not to make even a whisper. When the whole group was fully compliant in listening intently, the questioner let out the longest, loudest, most foul flatulence directly at my hiding place. He erupted in laughter as the rest of the group had mixed reactions of laughter or complete disgust, while I did my absolute best to not give myself away. A cough building in my chest as my eyes began to water. At last, the group moved on, splitting into two groups of morons, as was the usual course of action. When the sound of both had sufficiently faded, I collapsed onto the floor and allowed myself the smallest of coughs to clear my lungs before peeking out to be certain I was alone. The next doorway I needed was down the hall, where the dangerous imbeciles had come from. Once I went through those doors, I was in foreign territory. I had no idea what the comings and goings would be like, so I'd have to maintain strict diligence of focus. Certain that no one could see me, I crept from my safe zone and stayed low and against the wall, heading to the next door. I put my ear against it and listened. Silence. I cracked it open and slowly entered the next room. To my left was a bank of elevators. To my right, a restroom. But the hallway was empty. I stepped into the open and was deciding on whether an elevator or the stairwell was riskier when I heard voices approaching the door at the far end. Without a thought, I leapt to my right and into the restroom. I pushed a stall door open, closed it quickly behind me, turned the lock, and climbed onto the toilet, using my hands to balance against the walls of the stall, formulating a plan of what to do in the event that the group followed me into the restroom became unnecessary, as I heard them pause outside of the door and briefly chat before moving away. I wasn't sure where they had gone, or even if all of them had left, but I had to keep moving. I had no choice. I slipped out of the stall and poked my head out of the restroom. The hallway was once again empty. I decided to take the elevator down. There was an equal chance of an encounter with someone either way, but at least the elevator was faster. I needed luck for this to succeed, at this point anyway, so I pushed the button. The cables and gears of the elevator working sounded as though they were beckoning the whole building to take notice of the fugitive awaiting the doors to open. It felt like days passed, but finally the elevator arrived. I was prepared to flee to my restroom of refuge if someone was in the car, but fate shined on me and I stepped inside and pushed the fear of having nowhere to run deep inside as the doors closed in front of me. I had to get down 4 floors. If I could do that, I would be able to taste freedom. To this point, my vanishing act seemed to have gone unnoticed. I heard no alarms. No one seemed to be chasing me. The doors opened on the ground floor, and I stepped tentatively out, checking both directions. The lobby that the lift exited to was empty, aside from a few chairs and one low table. There was one guard station I had to get past, and then I simply needed to keep moving, far away from this place. The guard's head was down, distracted by whatever was keeping him glued to his phone. He didn't know me. I could simply walk past him, but even that seemed like a risk. It was not the time to get sloppy. Hugging the wall, I walked closer to the officer until I felt I had no choice but to crouch down. I still needed to move quickly in case anyone from the 4th floor found their way down here, but I'd have to do it from the ground. I laid flat and began to army crawl along the edge of the guard station's massive marble desk. When I'd reached the other side, I edged close to the wall again and inched my way to a standing position and began to walk. "Sir! Hey! Mister! Hey!" Panic. The guard must have finished his TV show at the worst possible time. I glanced back to see him getting out of his seat and coming my way. "Sir, you have to come back. Sir, you can't leave." Bet. I erupted into a sprint down the long hallway with windows on both sides. If anyone from the 4th floor could see me, it was all over. "You have to sign out. You can't just leave." Sign out? No way. The guard was gaining on me. He was fast, not like one of those lazy guards you'd see on TV who'd rather eat a donut than do a push-up. He was going to catch me before I could get off the grounds. It was over. I blasted through the door to the outside world and took the steps down 3 at a time. I heard the guard right behind me, closing in fast, just as a car pulled up and screeched to a stop. The door flung open. "Get in." I didn't stop to think. I jumped in and was closing the door as the car began to speed away. I glanced back to see the guard cursing and throwing his hands in the air before I turned to the driver. "Perfect timing," I grinned. "I wasn't sure if you could make it. You have your clubs? Matt's got 'em. He said he'd meet us there. So your boss let you go?" "Ha, no. But it's fine. No one knows I left. And by the time they find out, it won't raise any suspicions. No way I was missing the first round of spring. I knew it. I told them you'd make it. You just won me $20. Glad I could help you out. Buy me a beer at the turn. Now step on it. I want to putt a few before we have to tee off." Eaten up with indifference. Eaten up with indifference. I wake to the sound of gnawing, or possibly the sensation of my leg being pulled. It's impossible to know exactly what stirs me, and I'm not even sure if waking is the right term anyway. Am I awake? I am lying on my back, looking up at a single strip light on an otherwise unsurprisingly white ceiling. There seems no possibility that I might move my eyes to see why my leg feels so odd. No more can I move any other part of my body not even my tongue. This, a feeling that should induce panic. And yet, it doesn't. Thinking about it more, there's no particular need to move my tongue. And I don't really know why I've become fixated with the challenge. But I am, and spend what I should imagine is around 1 to 2 minutes trying to poke it out. There is tapping from the corner of the room, and an occasional stifled cough. And I assume, from what I can see and hear, that I am in a small, mostly white office space, occupied by a lady who types on an old-fashioned typewriter. Hello? I imagine, unable as I am to move my lips, mouth, or my diaphragm to produce any sound. The secretary, as I'm now sure she is, carries on with her task, and I hear a faint ting, announcing the completion of a line, followed by a thoroughly satisfying ratcheting noise as she starts the next. Tap, tap, tappity tap. The pleasant sensation of being in a room with a hard-working, old-fashioned typist is marred a bit by the chewing, slobbering sound of whatever, or whoever, is gnawing my leg off. Oddly, it doesn't hurt being eaten, if that is what is happening. And I find it puzzling as to why I feel no pain. I make a monumental effort to object, but nothing at all happens. So I decide to stick with the peculiar feeling of relaxed easiness that is the sound of the diligent office assistant. Do you want tea, Derek? The gnawing stops, and my leg settles. Yes, that would be lovely, Diane. Derek sounds very much as if he might still have a large portion of my lower calf in his mouth. It seems I'm being consumed by another human. A human with a very out-of-date name. I hope he will stand up, pop into my eye line so I can get a look at the fellow and try to communicate my displeasure at what he is presumably doing to me. Nothing happens as I try to move. Nothing at all, so I stop trying and lie still. There really is no other option open to me. The typewriter noises cease, and I hear the sounds of water filling a kettle. Ah, now that rings a bell. Yes, I am here to fix a dripping tap. Is the tap working now, Di? Derek says, confirming my recently revived memory. Seems fine. The plumber fixed the drip, and it turns off properly now. Apparently, I've done the job already. I do remember now. I hear water splash as she confirms her findings. But judging by the tugging sensation, Derek had lost interest and is back at his meal again. I am aggrieved at being referred to as the plumber, not because I'm not, or that I would prefer the use of my actual name, but more that I am being talked about as if I'm not present in the room. Well, Diana, that's not true. And it's actually rather rude to talk about me as if I'm not here. Hello, I'm here. I can't say. I conclude that the secretary is so used to her boss, if he is such, eating tradesmen, that she herself sees them as little more than snacks, like those sandwiches people buy from vans mid-morning. This brings me on to two further thoughts. Firstly, I should be hungry. I've not had my morning meal, and distinctly remember thinking that I would have something in the van once the tap was fixed. Secondly, Diana hasn't offered me a cup of tea. Both remembrances lead on to their own chain of smaller thoughts concerning the parking on yellow lines of my van, and the suspicion that Diana is deliberately ignoring me. The kettle boils to the accompaniment of that lovely crockery chinking sound and spoon in cup noise that make me wholeheartedly wish I too could have a nice cup of tea. It isn't thirst, possibly not even a desire to savor the taste. It is a need to be included as someone rather than something. The something being a meal. There you go, love. Thanks, Di, lovely. I imagine the scene, having only their conversation to work with. Di handing a nice, hot mug of tea to Derek. He, in turn, has now stopped chewing at my calf and is reaching around, taking his tea and pursing his lips for that first, utterly pointless, too hot sip. Can't see it, though. Only the ceiling. Why do we try and taste the first mouthful of freshly made tea when it is quite blatantly and obviously going to be too hot? That is unanswerable and annoying that I have no opportunity to practice the futility myself. Oh, hot, shouts Derek. I feel my leg being pushed, though without sensation, presumably to make space for the cup. I am little more than a dish being nudged aside for the beverage, and I do find that particularly unkind. Being eaten is one thing. At least I am wanted and a part of things when that is happening. Unpleasant as it so horribly is, or at least should be. Why don't I mind? A chair scrapes, and the sound of something being unwrapped, followed by a commentary from the freshly seated Di. Lovely cheese and pickle. Derek doesn't feel the need to comment. I get the impression that the secretary is perfectly happy with the position of denial that I have allocated her regarding my presence. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense that she should be eating plowman sandwiches with crisps crunch, crunch in the same room as a man devouring another human. So Diana is in denial. Are the secretary's name and denial anagrams? I never was good at that sort of thing, and eventually give up with a vague feeling of a leftover E, but no certainty at all. Why isn't other stuff more prevalent in my head? The question of being unable to move, what it is that has happened to cause my current perilous predicament, and how might it end? I'm not really bothered, though. I just feel sort of relaxed, with a vague uneasiness at being ignored by Di. It dawns on me that I am now discussing events in real time with myself. But that's fair enough, given the circumstances. I do hope I'm not going mad, though. Or have I already done so? And this is all just a part of that. It isn't. It's definitely real. A sudden, vigorous tugging at my outer thigh causes me to rock slightly, and the ceiling to dance in a slightly dizzying fashion. Whilst I can't pinpoint the exact location of the peculiar, numb pulling, I reckon Derek is gnawing hard at a portion of muscle just above my knee. It stops, and I listen as he chews, then feel slightly nauseated when he takes a large sip of tea. I've never liked that, watching people with mouthfuls of food taking a drink. Still, it would be nice to watch anything now, other than the ceiling, which is devoid of entertainment since a large housefly disappeared a while ago. Lovely tea, Di? Is it Yorkshire? Yes, nothing but the best. You know I always look after you, dear. After some time and a bit more leg pulling, the typing recommences, and I feel very glad of the happy clackety-clack, ringing bell, and satisfying ratchet noise. Time means nothing to me, and I don't feel that it is either dragging or speeding past. It just is. I must have been in a reverie of a sort, because at some point Derek has moved on to my other leg, starting at my foot, and I barely noticed the change. I feel hypnotically relaxed, uncaring, and unconcerned. I wish I could think of the word catatonic. Undoubtedly, but I think there is a better phrase that indicates something more than physical inability. Whatever it is, it shouldn't apply. What is happening to me should be alarming, but somehow I'm not as bothered as I most certainly should be. The lights go out after that, and I enter an entirely unknown passage of time before they flicker on again. However, many hours passed, and I'm guessing around 12. I still can't think of the word. It isn't euphoric, not at all. I hear someone taking their coat off, filling, and then switching on the kettle, and assume it to be Di, fortifying herself for another day at the office. I can't see anything but the ceiling and the fly, which has reappeared and is now as motionless as I am. It's Friday. There has only been one period of darkness since I arrived to sort out the tap on the Thursday morning. I must certainly have a ticket on my van by now, and know that my family are starting to wonder why I'm not home. But Mum won't be bothered. Not yet. He's probably stayed over at someone's after going to the pub. I imagine her saying to my father, who wouldn't have cared less, a bit like me, really. Still, I feel no emotion at all. Not about Mum, dumb, or even Nicole, who I am supposed to be taking for a curry tonight. Odd that, not worrying about my loved ones, but not as strange as the very slight but growing resentment that Diana is deliberately ignoring me. That feeling, the one of being irritated at being ignored, is actually the only strong one left. All others apparently crushed by that overwhelming lack of concern that still hasn't got a name. Derek's just arrived and has wasted no time at all tucking into my right upper thigh. He's barely spoken to his secretary and is actually paying me all his attention, even if only to consume my leg. As for Diana, surely she could at least have bent over and looked at me when she came in. Rude, that's what it is. But even this emotion is pretty subdued, and I forgive her once the happy tappity-tap, clackety-clack, dinging starts. It's all very soporific. Good word, that, but not the one I'm searching for. My mind wanders a bit as the day progresses. A day of ham and lettuce sandwiches for Di, and a large portion of my groin for her boss. I remember arriving on Thursday and finding the address of a run-of-the-mill Victorian terrace office with a brass plaque on the door. I'd parked on a double yellow on a back street that was less busy, safe in the knowledge I'd be back pretty quickly if it was just a tap washer job. "Plumber's here, Derek," Diana had said, introducing me by trade rather than name to her boss, who'd barely looked up from his desk, choosing to acknowledge me with little more than a wave. After that, I'm not sure what happened. I'm jolted from my reminiscences by the sudden ringing of a phone. Another relic of the past, I decide, given its distinct ring rather than a modern electronic noise. How nice it hadn't rung at all on Thursday. Perhaps they weren't that busy. "Hello, D&D accountants," says Di cheerily. Ah yes, D&D accountancy. I remember. Di isn't just a secretary at all, and she had referred to Derek as her husband at one point. I'd forgotten that. "Derek's a bit busy right now. I'm his partner. Can I help?" A bit busy, chomping through some inner part of me. The feeling of tugging is much less pronounced today, and I notice that my sense of hearing is slightly muffled. My vision not quite so acute. The strip light is very slightly blurred. I can still hear well enough, though, and the phone conversation should be providing some light relief to the ongoing tedium of immobility and lack of control. But no, I simply listen because it is happening, not for any other reason. "Yes, we can certainly take on your business, Mr. Court. Let me take down some details." I don't get bored of the half conversation. I just listen. In the end, I stop doing that too, and lie in my state of indifference as Derek slowly munches through my midriff. Eventually, the light goes off. Another amount of time passes, presumably an entire weekend. On Monday, it's more of the same. Clackety-clack and tuna salad on brown. The highlight of Monday, not that I measure events or grade them these days, is when Derek pulls violently on my left arm and I roll slightly to one side. I'm treated to a slightly blurred image of Di eating a chocolate biscuit and reading from a lovely old leather-bound diary before Derek pushes me back to a more prone position. It dawns on me in that briefest of moments that Diana doesn't own a computer. I find that most peculiar, but decide not to dwell on it too long. It's a lot harder to hear now. The phone rings twice, but I can't really hear the conversation. My sense of smell is still okay, and I recognized the metallic odor of what must be me. Alongside myself, I detect Di's perfume and the furniture wax polish that has been used on the beautiful, antique oak and leather topped desk I recall being in the center of the office. I'm on that desk now, or at least some of me is. On Tuesday, there's a delivery. I can't really hear much now, and my vision is so poor that there is either darkness or light, little else. So I don't know who has rung the barely audible buzzer or what it is that Di had gone to the front door to collect. Tappity-tap, but only just. I miss the ratchet sound and barely hear the ding. A week has passed, more or less. I realize that there is little more of me left than a head, and possibly a small bit of neck. Derek, it seems, is quite greedy. The very last thing I am aware of is the light flickering. On off, on off. It doesn't usually do that, having to date been a fairly decisive piece of electronics. A very muffled voice. Di, I think, lights on the blink. We'd better call an electrician. Yes, I hear Derek mumble through a mouthful of something. I'm about ready. Clackety-clack, and one last ding. Apathy. That's the word I was looking for. I wake to the sound of gnawing. Or is it the sensation of someone or something pulling at me? In the confusing half-second that exists in that time between consciousness and otherwise, it is very difficult to know what's real and what isn't. Where pirates came to die. A breath of wind slithered through the ruins and tumbled across his weathered face as he pressed the shard of limestone down the dry ashlar wall, leaving a new etched tally mark. It was a dimly lit chamber inside what was once the world's most notorious pirate prison. For him, it was a sanctuary, a place of refuge. Once the web developer for Shackleford Inc., in a city of skyscrapers, eclectic culture, and ultra-modern technology, Tom Malone scanned his Neanderthal calendar. 240 tallies made up the wall. Some were circled, and only he knew why. Gone were the titles of husband, employee, and neighbor. Given his isolated surroundings, the term castaway was more appropriate. A life filled with country club galas, company retreats, and exotic travel was lost. Survival had replaced living. Tom buttoned his slightly torn flannel shirt and grabbed his coat. He exited the chamber where the wrought iron door, rusted and bent, hung by a single hinge. He moved down the main corridor and stepped through a hollowed-out gap in the outer wall. The Rook, as it was called, was made up of 3 layers, undoubtedly to make escape near impossible for even the smartest buccaneer. If the legends were true, the Rook had seen the likes of Edward Davis and even Black Anthony zipping his coat. He trudged down the path to the beach. This was his routine every day. 2 laps around the island, The overcast sky produced a gloomy horizon, but that was normal for this time of year, or so he assumed. If the tallies were correct, it should be October. The sea was a gray mass of rippling currents. Tom breathed profoundly, absorbing the salty fragrance. The flow of the ambient tide took him back to simpler times when walking on a beach meant hunting for shark teeth, metal detecting for forgotten coins and jewelry, and collecting seashells that made their way into the guest bathroom. Such days seemed as far out of reach as the horizon. Suddenly, he spotted tracks. They snaked from the north before turning about just outside the rook's outer wall. He recognized the tread patterns as those of a Jeep Wrangler. Tom followed, occasionally glancing over his shoulder. When he reached the familiar bend on the beach, he heard the blast of a horn and dove behind a line of palm trees. Peering through the trunks, he noticed a docked ferry on the beach. A Jeep was climbing the ramp onto the ferry. Personnel in neon-colored jackets moved about the deck. Another search party, he thought. A mustached man in uniform, wearing the same jacket, examined an area in the sand. He spoke into his radio before moving further inland. Tom's heart leapt into his throat when he caught sight of the woman following behind. She wore a yellow raincoat, and her arms were folded tightly as the sea breezes pushed ashore. Her curls flailed and whipped, no matter what direction she faced. She said something to her uniformed companion and advanced toward the tree line. "No," Tom muttered, before slipping back from the bend. He tried to quicken his pace, but the dry sand absorbed every step. Once back in the chamber, he dropped to the floor and focused on slowing his breathing. The acoustics had almost given him away during the initial search months earlier. His heart drummed, and his temporal pulse thumped. He caught his face in the mirror, fragment by the tally wall. It had belonged to the mirror in the cabin cruiser's bathroom before Tom dismantled the million-dollar yacht upon his arrival. He gazed at the worn face and graying beard. Then there was the scar, where scalding grease once landed. "Tom!" came the woman's voice. He pressed against the chamber wall like a spy dodging a spotlight. "Mrs. Malone, we've searched the ruins before with no luck." He assumed this was the uniformed man. Tom felt his way down the chamber wall and gripped a loose stone. After a few careful tugs, it came out of its place. He reached into the cavity and pulled out the dust-covered Glock. "Tom!" Squeezing the seasoned grip, he inhaled deeply, closed his eyes, and exhaled. His mind traveled to the frost-covered day after his father was buried. Tom opened the gun cabinet and retrieved the pistol his father taught him to shoot with. "This will be yours someday," he would say at the range. Tom choked back the mist that wanted to erupt from his eyes. None of it matters now. Too much has happened. He took another lungful before pursing his lips and blowing out. He eyed the tallied wall and totaled the circled marks. 16. He suspected as much, but now he knew. One bullet remained. We need to call off the search. He called out, his voice nearer than before. That meant she was too. No, he's here. I know it, came her distraught and shaking voice. Tom pressed harder to the wall. He hoped the ancient stone could absorb him and conceal any trace of a man desperate to remain in the shadows. Ma'am, the weather is slowing us down, and the city cannot afford a stranded ferry with personnel on board. Would you stop if it was not if it meant putting others in danger? He ran his free hand over the scar. He traced the tight line of skin that ran from beneath his eye to the corner of his mouth. The sting had subsided long ago, but the hurt ran deep. Please, she pleaded, just let me look in here. The man radioed the ferry that he was making a final sweep of the old ruins, and that preparations for departure should begin immediately. For a moment, all was still. Tom, came the frantic echo. He slid his finger over the cold trigger. Never again will you scar me, Maria, he whispered. A single shot rang from the remnants of a place where pirates came to die. Strange paint. Deborah had always been a solitary artist, pouring her heart and soul into her work in a dimly lit studio that smelled of turpentine and linseed oil. Her latest masterpiece was a vibrant canvas depicting a mystical forest, alive with creatures that seemed to shimmer and dance under the flickering light of a nearby candle. As she painted the final stroke, the colors swirled and shimmered, as if the very essence of life had been captured within the frame. Unbeknownst to her, the painting was not just a piece of art. It was a portal to another realm, one that thrummed with whispers and secrets waiting to be uncovered. One stormy night, a curious art collector named Harold stumbled upon Deborah's gallery. He was immediately drawn to her latest creation, the forest, alive with colors that seemed to pulse in the dim light. Despite the warnings of the gallery owner, who sensed an unsettling energy emanating from the painting, Harold insisted on purchasing it. He felt an inexplicable connection to the artwork, as if it called out to him, promising wonders beyond his imagination. That night, he hung the painting in his study, entranced by its beauty and unaware of the darkness lurking within. Harold could not look away from the painting as the clock struck midnight. The figures within it, elusive woodland creatures and ethereal beings, began to shift and move, their eyes glinting with mischief and allure. They beckoned him closer, their whispers growing louder, promising secrets of the universe and glimpses of forgotten dreams. Each night, Harold returned to the painting, his heart racing with excitement and fear as he felt himself slipping deeper into its enchanting world. Days turned into weeks, and Harold's life began to unravel. He neglected his work, and isolation became his companion. Friends and family expressed their concern, but he brushed them aside, captivated by the beauty and mystery of the painting. In the quiet hours of the night, he would sit before the canvas, losing track of time as the figures danced and twirled, drawing him into their virulent realm where reality blurred into fantasy. The whispers became more urgent, more insistent, wrapping around him like a warm embrace. One fateful night, driven by an insatiable curiosity, Harold reached out to touch the canvas. The moment his fingers brushed against the surface, a surge of energy coursed through him, and he felt himself pulled into the painting. The colors enveloped him, swirling around him like a tempest, and in an instant, he was no longer in his study, but standing in the very heart of the enchanted forest. The creatures surrounded him, their laughter echoing like chimes in the wind, and he felt a sense of belonging that he had never known before. As days turned into nights in this new reality, Harold became a part of the painting, a mere shadow of his former self. He danced with the creatures, forgetting the life he had left behind, lost in a world where time held no meaning. Yet, deep within him, a flicker of awareness remained, a whisper of the life he had abandoned. The forest, once a place of wonder, transformed into a labyrinth of shadows, and the creatures he had once adored began to reveal their true nature, deceptive and sinister. In the end, Harold understood too late that the enchanting world of Deborah's painting was a trap, a seductive illusion that fed on his very essence. As he stood among the figures, now twisted and grotesque, he realized he had become one of them, a mere echo of a man who had once been alive. The painting hung in his study, a beautiful facade hiding the darkness within, whispering secrets to anyone who dared to gaze upon it, inviting them to join him in the eternal dance of despair. One rainy afternoon, a friend of Harold's, Claire, knocked on the door of his house. She had grown increasingly worried about him since he had purchased the painting. Harold hadn't returned her calls in weeks, and she felt an unsettling urgency to check on him in person. As she entered, the air felt thick, charged with an energy that sent a shiver down her spine. "Harold!" she called, her voice echoing through the dimly lit hallway. There was no response, only the sound of raindrops tapping against the window. Claire moved cautiously toward the study, her heart racing. The door creaked open, revealing the painting that had captivated Harold's very soul. She gasped as she stepped inside, the vibrant colors of the forest contrasting sharply with the shadows that loomed over the room. The painting seemed to pulse with life as Claire approached it, and she felt an inexplicable pull, as if the figures within were beckoning her to join them. But something was off. The forest looked darker than she remembered, and the laughter of the creatures now sounded like haunting whispers. "Harold," she called again, her voice trembling. Suddenly, she noticed a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye. It was Harold, standing eerily still before the painting, his gaze fixed on it as if he were entranced. She rushed to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Harold, are you okay? You've been gone for so long. I was worried sick." His head slowly turned to her, but his eyes were vacant, as if he were staring through her rather than at her. "Claire," he murmured, his voice distant. "You have to see. It's beautiful here. You can join me. We can be free." Fear gripped Claire as she looked back at the painting, where the creatures now gazed hungrily at her, their smiles widening. "Harold, this isn't right. You need to come back with me," she pleaded, shaking him gently, but he shook his head, a hint of desperation flickering in his eyes. "You don't understand. This is where I belong now. The forest. It holds everything I've ever wanted. You can't leave it. You have to stay." His voice grew softer, almost pleading. "You have to join us." Claire's heart raced as she realized the truth. The painting had ensnared Harold, twisting his mind and spirit, and now it was trying to lure her in as well. She took a step back, her instincts screaming at her to escape. "No, Harold! You have to fight it. This isn't you." At that moment, the creatures in the painting began to writhe and stretch, their forms becoming more grotesque, their laughter turning into a cacophony of chilling echoes. They reached out with elongated fingers, as if trying to break free from the confines of the canvas. The air grew heavy, thick, with a malevolent energy that made it difficult to breathe. "Join us, Claire," they chorused, their voices a twisted melody that tugged at her heart. "It's beautiful here. You'll never feel pain again." With a surge of resolve, Claire grabbed Harold's arm and pulled him away from the painting. "No, you're stronger than this. Remember who you are," she shouted, her voice breaking through the haze that enveloped him. For a brief moment, Harold blinked, confusion flickering across his face. "Claire? What's happening?" "Just breathe," she urged, her grip tightening around his arm. "We have to get out of here." The creatures within the painting howled in fury, their vibrant colors darkening as they sensed their prey slipping away. The shadows in the room twisted and churned, threatening to swallow them whole. Claire pulled harder, dragging Harold away from the painting, and as they stumbled backward, The connection between him and the canvas began to fray. With one last desperate attempt, the creatures lunged forward, their claws reaching for Harold. But just as they were about to grasp him, Claire shouted, "No!" and yanked him out of the study, slamming the door shut behind them. They stumbled into the hallway, gasping for breath, the oppressive weight of the painting's energy dissipating. Claire turned to Harold, who was finally coming back to himself, confusion and fear etched on his face. "What just happened?" he gasped, shaking as if waking from a nightmare. "You were lost in that painting," Claire said, her voice trembling. "It was trying to take you, to keep you forever. But we escaped. You're safe now." As relief washed over Harold, he looked back at the closed door of his study, where the painting hung silently, its colors muted in the absence of his gaze. "I didn't realize. I thought I was free." Claire placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You were caught in its spell, but you're stronger than it. We need to get rid of that painting before it claims anyone else." With newfound determination, they returned to the study, where the painting seemed to loom larger, its colors still swirling with a hypnotic allure. Together, they hatched a plan to destroy it, to sever the bond it had formed with Harold, and ensure that no one else would fall victim to its seductive trap. As they prepared to confront the darkness within the canvas, they knew that the battle was far from over. The forest might have tried to claim Harold, but together they would fight to reclaim his freedom and banish the malevolent forces that lurked behind the vibrant colors. The whispers from the painting grew louder, but this time they would not be silenced. Bloodlines. The first time I noticed something was off, I was 13. It was a school night, and I got out of bed late in the night to sneak a soda from the fridge. The house was silent, except for the low hum of the television in the living room. It was unusual for anyone to be up this late. My dad sat in his chair with the light off, watching the late news. The headline at the bottom read, "The Nightshade Killer Strikes Again. 15 victims confirmed." I watched silently for a moment while the reporter talked about a lack of clues and how the police seemed to be baffled. I remember the way my father's lip twitched as he sipped his whiskey, almost like a smirk. He noticed me standing in the doorway, and in a blink, his expression softened, becoming familiar and warm. "Hey, champ, can't sleep?" he asked as he muted the TV and rose from his seat. I told myself I had imagined the smirk. I must have. The encounter stirred memories of hearing my dad coming and going at late hours. How closed off he could be at times, and how he would sidestep Mom's questions of where he was going and who he was with when they fought behind closed doors, thinking I couldn't hear. He was hiding something. A few weeks later, they had a huge fight. Mom accused Dad of having an affair, which he denied. Mom and I ended up leaving for a few months that summer to stay with my grandparents. Dad eventually convinced Mom he was not having any affairs, that his problem was with gambling, and he was getting help. I'm not sure if Mom totally believed him, but we did move back home, and things did seem to get better. The late-night outings stopped, and the tension at home faded with time. Eventually, the memory faded too. The killings had stopped, and the Nightshade Killer became an urban legend, the subject of true crime, podcasts, and late-night horror stories kids told at sleepovers and on camping trips. The police moved the case onto the cold pile, and most thought he had died or been locked up for some other crime. Then, when I was in my late 20s, they found another body. The same victim type, the same ritualistic markings, and the same precision. The Nightshade Killer was back. That night, I visited my dad for dinner. As soon as I stepped into the house, I noticed something was off. The house seemed cleaner than usual. I could smell bleach in the air, thick enough to sting my nose. My dad was his usual self, calm and collected, always in control. He explained the smell away as a laundry mishap. He was still not used to doing it after Mom passed last year. During dinner, we talked mostly about me. Dad wanted all the details of how my life was going, all that I was willing to provide anyway. He asked about my work, life in general, and if I was seeing anyone yet. That is when I saw it. A faint red stain on the cuff of his sleeve. I got a good look as he poured a glass of whiskey for himself. The sight stirred something in the back of my mind that kept me up that night. That stain wasn't wine. It wasn't ketchup. It was blood. I knew it was. I remember the smirk. I needed proof. Real proof. The next day, I used my spare key to let myself in while Dad was out. My hands shook and felt more nervous than I expected. Not at the prospect of getting caught, but of the possibility of what I might find. The smell of bleach wasn't as strong, but it was accompanied by something else now. Something almost metallic. I made my way through the house systematically until I got to the basement door. It was locked. I don't remember the basement ever being locked. Using a bobby pin and a skill I picked up as a rebellious teenager, I clumsily picked the lock. The metallic smell hit me as the door opened. My stomach twisted as I descended the stairs, and the fluorescent light flickered to life overhead. The air was damp and cool, and as I reached the bottom and turned the corner, I saw them. Trophies. Photographs of women with terrified looks on their faces, and a date written on each one, neatly arranged on a workbench. Next to them, a stack of old newspaper clippings dating back to the first nightshade killings. In the far corner, a freezer with a padlock and a collection of knives laid out across the top, looking freshly cleaned. I didn't need to open the freezer. I already knew what I would find. A creak on the stairs made my blood run cold. "You shouldn't have come down here, champ." I turned slowly as Dad came around the stairs. His hands in his pockets, he watched me for a moment. His face showed no sign of fear at being found out, or anger that I had intruded. It was something more like patience, like he had been waiting for this moment my whole life. "It was you the entire time." My voice barely worked. I wanted to run and to throw up, but I couldn't move from that spot. Some sick part of me, something twisted and wretched in my blood, had to hear the word. I needed to hear him say them. "You killed them all?" "Yes." No hesitation, no remorse, just calm and collected as always, and merely stating a fact. "And now you have a choice to make." At that moment, I felt the weight of generations pressing down on me. My mouth went dry as I tried to swallow. I wasn't sure if I was afraid of him or of how much of him was in me. I felt my lip twitch almost involuntarily. Maybe I was afraid of the choice I already knew I would make. Stormy night. Eli Carter stood in the middle of Elm Street, rain pouring down like God's own wrath, drenching him to the bone. The water hit the pavement so hard it bounced. A million tiny suicides leaping from the sky only to splatter and die. The street lights flickered, their weak yellow halos barely piercing the downpour. His shoes squelched with each step, and his breath came in tight little gasps. He didn't know how long he'd been standing there. Minutes, hours, a lifetime? He had no memory of how he got here. A second ago, or maybe an eternity, he had been in bed, tangled in sheets damp with sweat, the weight of a dream pressing down on him like a lead blanket, a dream of movement, of running. Endless hallways stretched before him, impossibly long, bending at angles that didn't make sense. The walls, lined with doors, slammed shut behind him, one by one, not by his doing, but by something unseen, something chasing, something that wanted him. Each door he passed felt like a choice he had already failed to make. Each slammed door, a lost opportunity. His breath had come in gasps. His legs ached from running. But the hallways never ended. Just turn after turn, door after door, the floor shifting beneath his feet like the belly of a great beast. There were no windows, no light, except the sickly glow of something overhead that wasn't quite a bulb, wasn't quite fire. And in the air, thick as humidity in August, was the hum of something enormous. Some deep, resonant sound felt more in his ribs than in his ears. And then, this. The dream had ruptured, torn apart like thin fabric. And he had been here, the rain, the street. No transition, no waking up. Just one reality swapped for another, seamlessly, cruelly. His mind struggled, clawing for logic where there was none. The downpour drummed against his skull, cold rivulets snaking down the back of his neck, washing away the last frayed edges of the dream. But had it even been a dream? Because the certainty struck him now, deep and final. A stone dropped into the well of his gut. Something was very, very wrong. A flicker of movement caught his eye. Across the street, just beyond the yawning black mouth of an alley, stood a man. He was tall and thin, dressed in a suit too old-fashioned to be modern, but too crisp to be antique. His face was long, almost horse-like, but his eyes were holes, not black pits, not deep shadows, holes, like someone had taken an ice cream scoop to his face and dug them clean out. Eli took a step back. The man took a step forward. A chuckle floated through the rain, thin and reedy, like laughter being played backward on an old cassette tape. Eli turned and ran. The city around him twisted as he moved, as if reality itself were coming undone, unraveling thread by thread. The buildings groaned, their bones creaking, their very foundations shifting beneath his frantic steps. They leaned in, warping like softened candle wax left too close to a flame, their brick faces drooping, sagging, watching. Windows blinked, slow, reptilian, sluggishly adjusting their focus. Black pupils contracting and expanding, as if deciding whether to acknowledge him or swallow him whole. The sidewalks rippled beneath him, no longer solid, but something uncertain, something alive. Each step sent out concentric rings through the puddles, distorting his reflection. His face melting, elongating, breaking apart into something unrecognizable. The street lamps flickered, their light stretching and warping, casting shadows where there should be none. Shadows that flickered and darted, mimicking his movements with a half-second delay, as if considering whether they should obey him or something else entirely. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. His feet pounded against the street, their rhythm desperate, breath hitching in his throat, like a song caught on a broken record. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed, but none of it mattered, because behind him, gaining, closing the distance with something worse than footsteps, was him. No sound, no breathing, just presence, heavy, dense, a gravity that pressed against the nape of Eli's neck, thick as storm clouds rolling in, the air charged with something unspeakable. His skin prickled, his instincts screamed, "Don't look back, don't look back." But something deep inside him, something ancient and terrified, already knew if he turned to see what followed, it would be the last thing he ever saw. He rounded a corner and slammed into something solid. A wall? No. A person. A woman. She was small, bird-like, with a sharp face and sharper eyes. Her raincoat was red, vivid, almost glowing against the gray world around them. She grabbed Eli by the shoulders, her fingers biting into his flesh like talons. "You need to wake up," she hissed. "I am awake." She shook her head. Not yet. A roar split the air behind him. Not a human sound. Not even an animal sound. A sound made of nightmare and hunger, of places that existed only in the deepest recesses of the brain. The places humans had long since forgotten how to fear. Eli turned. The man was closer now, his mouth stretching into an impossible grin, jagged teeth protruding like broken piano keys. The woman yanked Eli to the side, dragging him toward the nearest door. It wasn't there a second ago, but it was there now. A rusted metal thing, standing in the middle of the sidewalk, freestanding, no walls to frame it. She shoved it open and pulled him through. Everything flipped. Inside out. Upside down. Eli hit the ground hard, the breath leaving his lungs in a rush. He rolled onto his back, staring at the ceiling. The ceiling of his bedroom. The rain was gone. The city was gone. The woman gone. He was lying in his own bed, tangled in sweat-drenched sheets, the room bathed in the cold glow of his alarm clock. 3:47 a.m. A dream. Just a dream. He sat up, rubbing his face. His hands were shaking, fingers twitching like dying spiders. His throat was dry, a desert of cotton and dust. He needed water, something real, something solid to anchor himself. The lingering weight of the dream, or whatever it had been, clung to him like a second skin, sticky, suffocating. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and froze. His feet were wet, not damp, not dewy with sweat. Wet, like he had waded through a flooded street, like he had stepped barefoot into the mouth of a storm. His pajama pants clung to his calves, the fabric sodden and heavy, waterlogged with something that smelled faintly of earth and rot. The cold bled into his bones. Then he saw it, a tiny river of water, glistening in the dim glow of his bedside clock, winding its way across the floor like a snake slithering home. It led to the bedroom door. No, not just to the door, through it. And there, stark against the pale wood, were muddy footprints. His footprints, Eli's breath hitched. His ribs felt too tight, his heart slamming against them like a frantic bird trapped in a cage. He reached out with a trembling hand and touched the sheets, sopping wet. The scent of rain clung to them, sharp and electric. The metallic tang of a storm that had no place inside his room. A storm that should not have followed him here. The air shifted behind him. The closet door creaked. The sound slow and deliberate, like a sigh from something old and waiting. The shadows inside it gaped, thick and hungry, and then, oh God, then from the darkness came a chuckle, thin, reedy, a sound that knew him.